Greetings and welcome. Welcome to Reflections of Hattie McDaniel. My name is Denise Sherman, and I serve as the Executive Director here at the Kansas African American Museum, also known as TCAM, and I'm a proud member of the Board of Directors for Tallgrass Film Association, and we are celebrating our 22nd annual Tallgrass Film Festival. And we welcome you here today. So each year, the Kansas African American Museum supports Tallgrass Film Festival with their movies and with their activities that center around the African American experience. And so with that, what guides the museum here is 4 pillars. Our 4 pillars are art, history, education, and culture. So it's a natural fit when we're able to engage in film and in activities that supports our African American experience. So today we have a wonderful opportunity to talk with our special guest, Mr. Kevin John Goff. He is a filmmaker, an actor. He's also a public speaker, a visionary, an entrepreneur, but most important, he's the great-grandnephew of the legendary actor, Miss Hattie McDaniel, who herself started her journey right here in Wichita, Kansas. There's so many things about her story that we're not aware of, and we're so excited to visit with you and learn more and get some personal reflections. So thank you for coming. Welcome.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Kansas African American Museum. Denise, everything you're doing, your staff, beautiful.
So let's get started. How did we even come together today? How did this happen?
Gosh, wow. A bunch of emails, later some phone calls, Zoom calls. You were having an event that was going to happen in 2021 surrounding a replacement of a marker for Hattie at her former home location. And you wanted me to write something from the family, like, thank you for, thinking about this family, and we appreciate it, kind of a thing. And I was thinking about it, and I said, I need to write more than that. So I stayed up about to 2 or 3 in the morning and wrote a poem. And by 6 a.m., I had it all edited and cleaned up as best as I thought I could, and I shot it over to you, and the rest was history.
Well, let me tell you, when I got that email first thing in the morning, I couldn't believe it. I was like, you're kidding me, because I thought when we first visited about the installation of the history marker that we were placing at the birthplace of Hattie McDaniel to make sure we honor and preserve her history here and to let people know how important she was for us, and that her journey actually started here in Wichita before we knew her later in life. I said, let's see if we can maybe get a few words that we can include in the ceremony. And I got this awesome poem, and it was like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I think, that you sent it, and I was beside myself because our event was that morning. So we hurried up and had it printed, and our board president at the time, Ebony Clemens, actually read it, and it was so moving to hear how you felt about Hattie, how you felt about us, and the fact that her recognition and her history was being acknowledged at the very beginning of her journey. And I think that's really today what we want to hear from you, is not only her journey, but how she influenced others throughout this difficult time throughout her life. I mean, she was born in 1893 right, and died in 1952. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And you think about the political, the social, the different cultural climates throughout that time period. Hattie McDaniel saw a lot. And so I'm going to stop because I think it's more important that you share those things than I do. So let's start with the first question. How did Hattie come to your awareness and your relationship with as the great-grandnephew? Tell us a little bit about that background.
Yeah, I was, the story starts, I was in D.C. Where we were living, my entire family, parents and siblings. And I was 8 years old, and I didn't know it, but my parents were separating. And all of us, except my father, went to Texas, and my dad went to California. But, you're 8 years old, you're like, something's different. Where's Dad, kind of a thing. And for the next, 10 years, I saw my dad maybe 2 or 3 times. But the amazing thing is my mother never spoke ill of him ever. She always kept it positive. And, being that young, I didn't really have conversations with my parents about Hattie and her siblings and that side of the family. But I was always watching black and white classic films as a young kid in Texas. There was a show that would come on at midnight during the week, and I would wait for my mother to go to sleep, and I snuck out of my bed, and I would turn on the TV and watch the show at midnight, and it had the Barry White love theme. And that's how the show came on. So first Barry White is going on, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And here's these movies with Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn and Clark Gable. And then I started to notice that in a lot of these films, there were these black characters. And it wasn't until years later that when I reconnected with my father, had a chance to spend time with him in California, that I realized those were my relatives. That was Uncle Sam and my great-grandmother Etta, and then Hattie. And it just blew me away that all this time I was watching them and mesmerized by that, and I'm like, oh, that's kin. So that's how that whole awareness thing started. And as I spent more time with my father, after high school, he would tell me stories about the family and Hollywood, and it just built up from there.
So what, as a young man, struck you first about being mesmerized with this medium, and then learning that you're related? I mean, tell us a little bit more about that awareness.
I always wondered, or my mother always wondered, I was always up to something creative, and I would just do these things off the cuff. And she was like, where's this energy coming from? And I guess it was coming from the McDaniel side of the family, because that was Hattie's story. She was probably from birth entertaining people. She loved to make people laugh, loved to make people smile. And that was that connection for me, is that, oh, okay. And it just made me more curious about the family and about entertainment, and it just kind of just expanded from there.
So Hattie was the baby of the family.
Yeah.
And how many siblings? And
13 children in total, and she was the youngest.
Yeah. And they moved from Wichita to Colorado at about what age for her?
She was probably 7, maybe 6 or 7. It was around 1900.
So what people don't know about Hattie, now we know her from Gone with the Wind and some of her later work, but there's this whole makeup of Hattie that a lot of people are not aware of, and that's part of what we do at the museum, is tell the stories. We know the story of Hattie, but what are the stories that have not been told? And so to kind of set this up, Hattie was a woman who was a professional. She was a civic leader, a community advocate. She was very much a mentor to others, and she was mentored through some of her peers as she went through. But what about the early Hattie and her family as entertainers?
Well, the parents were, in a lot of ways, entertainers. Her mother, Susan, was a gospel singer. And the father, Henry, he did some preaching and had a minstrel troupe, so he was doing entertainment stuff. And then the older siblings, Otis and Etta and Sam, they were always putting together these kind of projects, and Hattie was, real young and wanted to be a part of that. And so she had to bug her parents until they, gave in for her to go on the road with them.
Do you think that some of that nurturing came from her siblings as well? Because if you think early 1900s, 1910, 1920s, that's a difficult time. And you kind of start out with the silent movies, and then you transition into the talkies and things like that. How do you think that maybe nurtured her into moving into some other spaces as an entertainer?
Well, Otis was like the glue of the siblings. He was out there first and doing a lot of vaudeville and things of that nature, and then Sam joined him, and then eventually Etta, and that inspired Hattie, and Hattie and her sister Etta formed a production company. These are two black women in like 1914 with a production company, and it was called the McDaniel Sisters Company, and So they were producing shows, tent shows, going on the road, singing, dancing, white audiences, black audience. They just, the show they would do for a white audience was a little different for the show they would do for a black audience. So they kind of knew how to walk that tightrope and navigate the era. So, from there, she starts doing radio later. She became a songwriter in the early 1920s. So before she even got to Hollywood, she was already a very well accomplished professional, which I'm sure that helped her on her Hollywood journey.
You talk about how she was able to be situational, if you will, or transformative, and also be very aware of the political and the social climate at that time. So she has a show for one group of people and another show for another. How do you think she was how do you think she was working in some of the difficulties or some of the issues of the day within her performances? Do you think that early in that time period she was actually, we think of comedians today when they talk about tough topics and they kind of work in some things that they're wanting to bring light to. Do you think Hattie was somewhat doing that at that time?
Oh, yeah.
Was very aware and using
Yeah.
her platform to be a social commentator, if you will?
Well, I know, like, if she was doing a performance in front of a black audience, that's a whole different type of spiritual thing, and she would make kind of like light of the contrast of that. She could be in front of a white audience and perform in a particular type of way, but when she would be in front of a black audience, she could address the things that they were going through in a white-driven industry and world, the things that they suffered behind, or some of the indignities, mischaracterizations, those kind of things, and they would put that into their art. So, Hattie was very well spoken. She was compassionate, but she also knew how to speak up for herself. So having that combination of, yes, I care about people. I don't care who you are. I want to do the best for everyone. At the same time, if you throw sand in my face, I'm going to have some words with you. So she wasn't a pushover, but at the same time, she was a soulful and nurturing person.
So speaking of that, we know that there were some groups that were critical of her and some of the roles that she would take on and how she was able to make her living. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, the criticisms, and one thing about Hattie is, if you're being criticized for what you love and what you're doing, that's a bitter pill to swallow. But she was toughened. She was toughened by what she saw growing up. Her father was a Civil War veteran who had a drastic injury during the war. His jaw was shattered from some type of explosion. So throughout his life, he suffered from that injury. He didn't get the same medical care as his white counterparts during the Civil War. And she saw him come back from the war. He's probably diminished by 50%, and he's still going out doing labor jobs. And of course, her mother had 13 kids. I mean, I can't speak on that personally, but I know for women that's a tough thing. I mean, to have one child and have to worry about that and nurturing 13, and then to watch almost half of those siblings die right after birth or during birth, or half of them didn't reach adulthood. So Hattie is seeing that loss. Her first husband, he passed away unexpectedly in around 1915. Her brother Otis around the same time. Her parents died in 1920 and 1922. While all this death is going on around her, in the chaos of it and the times in which she lived, she's performing. And so you have to really toughen up to be able to get up in the morning after those kind of situations.
I'm just thinking as you were talking about that, it's still that way today. I mean, for her to have that fortitude to navigate herself through with whatever support she can have, muster up. And it didn't all just come from her family. I mean, there were both black and white folks who did support her throughout her career. I think it was Douglas Fairbanks, one of the actors, and some of the others, Joan Crawford, and some of those who were in support of Hattie. later on. But do you think that her journey from Wichita to Colorado, and then the next stop was California? Is that correct?
Well, there was Chicago for a little bit.
Oh,
There was
okay.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Kind of fill
for a
us in on
time.
that period.
Yeah, during this was like around the Depression or just before, and she was really having hard times trying to make ends meet. So she was working in a women's washroom in a place called Sam Pick's. It was like a club, and she wanted to go on. There were performers at this club. She wanted to perform, but the owner's like, "No, we can't have you performing, because you're a woman of color." But something happened to their regular singer, and I guess the owner was like, Hattie, come here. Can you go on? Can you? Because he's in a pinch. And she goes on, and she just blows the door off the place, and that was kind of like cemented her there, and kind of gave her a little firm foundation before she got to Hollywood. But she was on the road touring with orchestras, the George Morrison Orchestra, and they were performing on the Pantages circuit, and I think there might have been a little Orpheum love going on there at the time, and so yeah, she was kind of juggling despair with just you're just trying to keep your head above water.
Yeah, despair and joy. So with that, talk a little bit about her radio career, because didn't she have a radio show?
Her brother Sam got her an audition in Colorado, station KOA, and he had a show on there, and he talked to, I guess, the programmers there, and they were able to get her on the show, and she was very, very well received, of course, and she later did radio also in Los Angeles. And
Did she do a voice and a character? Am I recalling that correctly?
there was one character that she was known as was High Hat Hattie, and she wore these, hats, and I guess they were high. But yeah, she had these characters. She was kind of known as the Black Sophie Tucker or the female Bert Williams. And some people have to Google who those people are. And but she was building up a following, and it goes back to Wichita. That was the foundation, the platform. Her as just a little girl, and just going out and entertaining just the people she loved and neighbors, transitioning to Colorado. Her father was having trouble finding work. The brothers and her other sister on the road trying to make money to support the family. Hattie says, "Hey, I want to help too. Can I drop out of high school?" Obviously, the family must have been in a really dire situation for them to say, "Yeah, you can drop out of high school." Because what parent is going to say that, But she had to talk them into that. And she went on the road, and I kind of compare Hattie and her siblings in a way to Michael Jackson and his siblings. The Jackson brothers were talented. And then little Michael, once he got in there, they were like, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" And so Hattie had that kind of Michael Jackson effect within her family and siblings, but it was just watching her parents and her siblings just maneuver and do the things they were doing to have community and family. And so she was building that character and those layers of what was in her war chest of talent.
So we're looking at young Hattie, young adult Hattie who was making her way through difficulties, supporting family, and then we get to the Hattie, the successful Hattie. Let's talk a little bit about that Hattie.
Yeah, the even more successful Hattie, where maybe the money was, stacking up a little more. But when she first got to Hollywood in the early '30s, Otis never made it to Hollywood. He passed away before Hollywood, but he would have been there because he was just as talented as the rest of the siblings. But Sam and Etta were in Hollywood. Hattie followed shortly after that, and they were all doing quite well. And Hattie was getting roles, but they were small roles, comedic. So by the time Gone with the Wind came up, this was a dramatic role, and she went to the audition, dressed the part, and let's not forget Hattie was a domestic worker. She worked at home. She cooked. She scrubbed floors. She knew that character because she lived that life. So she went into that audition, and and I'm sure, I think Selznick was like, that's her, that's Mammy right there. And Hattie was being criticized, and it confounds me because there were tens of thousands and thousands of black performers in Hollywood at that time as Hattie. They were all playing the same roles. It wasn't just like everyone had a lead role and Hattie says, oh, I want to play a maid. No, if you were a black woman in Hollywood, you were playing a maid. If you were a black man in Hollywood, you were a butler or a hotel porter, a train porter, or you're in the field picking cotton in a scene. So it wasn't that she made those conscious decisions to play those roles. Those were the roles that were available if you wanted to work in the Hollywood system. Not everybody was going to be Oscar Micheaux and make his own films outside of the system, and it was difficult for him because he didn't have a wealth of money to make his films, but he did what he could. So I look at it like, and Hattie says this, there are two ways to fight any existing evil. You know, you can fight it from the inside or you can fight it from the outside. Oscar was on the outside fighting. Hattie was on the inside trying to make changes, you know, subtle changes, and she did that because that performance she gave, and she knew a lot was riding on it, it catapulted and opened up the minds of what could be for the black performer. And they knew what they were capable of. But if you have a system telling you, no, you can, and you're less than, and you're three-fifths human or something like that, and you're being labeled with, you know, derogatory names, you know, you fight through that, and she fought through it. She made that decision, and it had to start somewhere.
Didn't she say, I would rather play a maid than be a maid?
Yeah, I'd rather make $700 playing one than $7 being one. Yes. I mean, you in context, you have to look at the times, and I know people in modern times go, oh, well, if I was back there, I would have told these people off, and I would have, yeah. You know, we had that conversation. Yeah. And it's like, no, you can't walk in those shoes. You weren't there. That was a whole different time. If you were a black person on the street corner and you looked a white person in the eye the wrong way, you can get lynched. And some people did. So, you know, there was that reality of her life at that time. Her entire life was during Jim Crow. So we have to remember that. So she's going through these things that are, I guess you can say, commonplace. Not necessarily, she didn't enjoy it. No one enjoyed that kind of treatment or that environment, but it created a resolve. It created a courage. So when she went to Hollywood, if she got turned down for a role, you think that was going to stop her? No, she's seen a lot worse than being turned down for a movie role. And I think that's what made her successful.
What's your favorite story of Hattie?
Wow. I think it's, I think about when, all the things that she had to go through. She wanted to be buried at Hollywood Memorial Cemetery, and they said, no, we don't allow black people in here. The house she lived in, there were a group of white neighbors, and not all the white neighbors had this feeling, but there was a group of white neighbors that said, we don't want you here. So they formed a lawsuit, restrictive covenant, which prior was a legal thing. It used to hold weight. So here you are, you have this home, you're making good money, you can afford the home, and people, no, we don't want you here. And she wasn't allowed to go to the premiere of Gone to Win in Atlanta. So all these atrocities or horrible things are happening, and that's just a few. And while all of that is happening, she's helping other people. She's raising money for the war effort, selling war bonds. This is kind of emotional. She's mentoring people. She's visiting wounded soldiers while she's being treated the way she was treated. That's my favorite story. It's like you're being stepped on or disregarded, but it doesn't change your compassion and your integrity. She kept her integrity during all that. And that just blows me away. That's courage.
So, it didn't diminish her light. It didn't diminish her her spirit in a way that she still didn't see that her value and that her self-worth was strong enough to not only support herself but others and help encourage them. I think about some of the actresses today. They probably don't have any idea how much Hattie paved the way for them.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some that do, but I'm sure there are some that don't. We tend to forget the generation or generations before. Like, for example, in music, if someone today samples a song and like the Fugees had the song, ready or not, here I come, you can't hide. And everyone, I was talking to this gentleman, he said, oh, that's a bad song.
Yeah.
The Fugees. I said, well, they didn't write that song. No. Yes, they did. I mean, we were about to throw blows over this song. I said, that was the Delphonics, man.
Exactly.
And I played it for him. And he was like, that happens all the time.
Yes.
In all kind of industries, like, you didn't invent that. Someone reinvented the wheel or repackaged it. Mm-hmm. So that's, that gets forgotten.
But for Hattie, this is coming through the first round. This is a new space that they're getting into. Mm-hmm. The evolution over the years, and so it is authentic. It is original, and so I guess trying to say that while she forged the way, made the path, cleared the trail, or whatever, it's still impactful that she was able to do so without having a lot of support and guidance, if you will, generally from society, because there's all these things, all these challenges and barriers and difficulties that come your way, but yet you learn how to navigate and knock down walls and continue to go forward and contribute.
Right. I mean, I one example I think about is there was a movie, it was in the 1940s with Hattie in it. I can't remember which one right now, but there's a scene where Hattie is serving a white family at a table in their, breakfast. Mm-hmm. She's serving them breakfast. And she's not the focal point of the scene. She's in the scene and she commands the screen, but she's the only Oscar winner in the scene. Mm. But she's the one serving this family. And I was looking at that and I was just thinking about, wow. It was just to see that from that viewpoint. Mm-hmm. It was kind of telling, and I just think about the things that, she was very successful and did a lot of things, had a lot of accomplishments, but I was thinking about, wow, if you strip away the barriers, what would she have done then? Yeah. Would she have loved to be in a love scene with Cary Grant? Probably, I guess. It's Cary Grant, right? Oh, Hattie, come over to my place and we can trip to life fandango. Okay, Clark. Okay, Carrie, but, I would have loved to seen Hattie draw a 6-gun and shoot down somebody, Jack Palance or something, I would have loved to see Hattie throwing somebody through a window out of a saloon or, it just, it just boggles my mind the things that could have been, but she took what was available to her and she didn't wallow in what that was. And she just said, you know what? I'm just going to add me into it. On a printed page, it might not look like much, but when I get through with it, it's going to look like something. So when you look at her performances, she's not subservient. She's not, yes, sir, no, sir. No, she's like, what did you say? She's in your face, and I love that about her. She and that wasn't scripted. I'm sure the director was like, "What is she doing?" Yeah. She wasn't supposed to do that, but she knew inflections and physical comedy and how to use her body and her eyes and delivery. And when the directors would see it and they go to the dailies and look at it, they would go, "Oh my God, that's pretty good," Yeah. And they just embraced it.
Was she kind of a short woman? She kind of
5'2" and probably 200 pounds.
So you say that because the way you see pictures, and there's one movie where she dances, and there's a scene, and I can't think of the name of it. I'm so sorry about that. Mm-hmm. But she did have a great awareness of her body and how to command and how to exude respect, and dignity in scenes that you would normally, again, probably be subservient because that's what the role called for. But she did it in a way that it's like, well, we're going to do the best we can, and we're going to be proud of who we are. And I love that you recognize that, and you
Right.
shared that.
Yeah, I think it was just a natural instinct, but I'm sure it was part natural instinct and part
Defiance, maybe?
and a little defiance. I think it was a combo. So, and it served her well. It elevated and showed a slice of what she could do, because we never saw the full Hattie. She never got a chance. She never got a chance to show, and not just her, a lot of black performers. The thing about that is, any of us or anybody in the world, if we have a situation where we shortchange somebody or don't recognize them, you can't get it back if they're gone. You can't get that back. Hattie's not here to hear this. Maybe she can hear it in the rafters of heaven, but I mean, when she was here, you can't get that back. Hollywood can't say to her, you know what, we gave you a raw deal, we stereotyped you, we put you in a box. Here, let's do a 10-picture contract, and it's too late, But we can celebrate what she did and realize there's a lot underneath the surface of her life and things she went through. And I think if that was thought about more back in the days when she was being criticized, they wouldn't have did that, because it wasn't her, it was a system.
Right.
It wasn't Hattie's fault. She was just trying to work within that system, which there wasn't balance in it. So I admire her greatly.
Well, she left enough for you to pick up the mantle. And so share a little bit with us what the project you're working on and how you are continuing Hattie's legacy from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, my father, it was his mission, before it was my mission. And we had talks here and there about, okay, one day, I want you to take this on. And I half understood that, and as years went on, I appreciated more. And then he and I started to work together a little bit, and I used to, he was an architect by trade, and he would take me by houses that he designed, and he would tell me these stories related to that and his family. It just shows you that there are all these amazing stories to tell, and a lot of them get lost. There are many stories that we will never hear, and that's a shame. And thank goodness for places like the Kansas African American Museum that works hard to bring this out and to share these experiences, and film festivals, these independent filmmakers who otherwise might not have a voice. Not every filmmaker has, $100 million lying around so they can make the next Superman. So it's a combination of what's going on here, places like the Orpheum, right, Stacy? To show these things and these different stories to recognize and not let more things slip through the cracks and under the rug.
So you have a book coming out?
I have a book on Hattie coming out in February. It's more about some personal life stuff. It's kind of like a mix of her quotes, and her quotes are very telling. When you read her quotes, you're getting a snapshot into what her mind was about, what she was thinking. My favorite quote is, God, I have about 10 favorite quotes.
Well, you can say all 10 if you like.
But she talks about the Federal Reserve System, and she says, faith is the black person's Federal Reserve System. Not money, not gold bullion, homes, cars, jewelry, faith. And I get it, if she didn't have faith going through all those things she was going through, if she didn't have that reserve system, what would have happened to her? I mean, I remember in 2016, just prior to meeting my amazing wife, Jillian Carter Goff, right there. She's right here on the second row. There she is. So, I remember we were just, getting to know each other, and I was at home speaking to my neighbor. This is 2016, people. And the police pulled up, and they got out of the cars, and they said, "We heard gunshots. You got a gun in your bag?" Someone called and said, "You guys have a gun." I had just came from a meeting. I was in slacks and a sweater and had my briefcase, and they said, "I'm gonna look in your briefcase and see if there's a gun in there." And they went through my bag, and then the other cop came and said, "Okay, turn around, face the garages where our cars were parked," and they handcuffed us. And they made us stand there for 30 minutes. And I remember seeing when those cars were coming at us, because I think I don't know if I put some kind of energy out there, but I saw the police car pass by, and I said to my neighbor, I said, "Wouldn't that be strange if that car backed up and came shooting down the alley at us?" And sure enough, as soon as I said that, the police car backed up and turned and came shooting at us down this alley where the garages were. So here we are, we're handcuffed. And I looked at my neighbor. Before we got handcuffed, before the car got there, I said, "Just be cool so we can survive." Because if, and we're handcuffed, and I wanted so badly to say something and say, "What's your badge number?" But we were in the alley where it was no one else back there but the garages and the cars. And I was like, all these other things were happening in the news where melanated people were being executed. And I was like, if I say what I want to say, I might not make it tonight. So I'm gritting my teeth, and I wanted to cry, not because I was afraid, because I was pissed off. And this was just 8 years ago. So I'm thinking about, well, what was Hattie going through 70, 80 years ago, 100 years ago? I mean, she'd be 131 today. So it just shows, you mentioned earlier, there are some things that haven't changed. There are physical shackles, and there are spiritual shackles, and there are still mind games that happen. There are still people that are afraid for their life. Whenever I got in the car with my brother back in the day in Texas, and he'd see a cop behind us, he would start to hyperventilate. And I said, "Be cool, you gonna make him stop us, And he's like, oh my God, man, will you stop it? Stop it. But he had that fear, because those things would happen. But I met some great policemen, don't get me wrong. I almost joined the police force in the LAPD 2 days before Rodney King got beat. And then I was getting ready to go to my next appointment with the police and take a psychological test. And Rodney King is on TV getting beat, and I said, "Well, I'm not gonna go to this appointment." No, so that stopped that. And that angst is still out there, that those possibilities of harm are still out there. And so, of course, Hattie and people like her and family and other people of that era had to be careful, like we were talking about the tightrope. You had to know when to speak, when not to speak. And it wasn't because you weren't confident or you thought less of yourself. You just wanted to live to the next day.
What do you think Hattie would say today from her journey and then to push us forward? What would she say to us?
She would say, keep pushing. And she would be hugging everybody in here, all of you. She was that kind of a person. And she would be thrilled about the things that have continued to happen in her name. Her Oscar was missing for over 50 years, and it was a byproduct of Martin Luther King being assassinated in '68. And then there were riots because of that assassination, and Chicago and DC were very hard hit. Riots, National Guard, people dying, fires. And somewhere between 68 and 70, we don't know when, the Oscar vanished, and it hasn't been seen since. So last October 1st, 2023, they finally reissued a replacement Oscar at Howard University in DC.
And you had a chance to go and be a part of it.
Yeah, I was there. I had got a call during COVID from the Academy, Don Hudson and Bill Kramer, who is now the CEO of the Academy. And they said, But see, they called me not because it was there. That wasn't the first move. The first move was I wrote an article for the San Diego Tribune where my wife and I were living, and it was talking about a lot of the things that were happening to black individuals. You know, like the Black Wall Street and the syphilis. You know, where where they weren't getting the, you know, they knew they had it, but they wouldn't give them the medicine, and all these different stories like that. And you know, around that time, so I sent a copy of that letter to the press person, the public relations person at the Academy, and I guess it made her panic. And she's like, "Oh my God, is he going to pull a Spike Lee and get loud? I mean, you know, like say something, you know, because Spike Lee will speak his mind. He's like, oh no, this is." So within 10 minutes of me sending that article, the PR person called me. She said, "Mr. Goff?" I said, "Yes." Yeah. She said, "Dawn Hudson would like to speak to you. Well, do you have?" I said, "Okay." She said, "She wants to call you in 10 minutes." And I said, "Okay." And we hung up the phone, and I was like, okay, somebody's nervous. So I think they wanted to feel me out to see where my energy was. Was I gonna do some protesting? Was I gonna throw rocks at the Academy building? You know, that's not my style. So they called me and they said, "Hey, Mr. Goff, how you doing?" I said, "Great." And they said, "We got good news for you." I said, "What's that?" "We're going to replace Hattie's Oscar." Coincidentally, because because people have been trying to get that Oscar replaced for years, and the gentleman who created this artwork, Jason Kitchion, is it Kitchion? Mm-hmm. Years ago, I had a chance to communicate with him by phone, and he said, "Mr. Goff, I did this artwork. I donated to the Kansas African American Museum," and he sent me attachments so I could see what it looked like. And he said, I wrote the Academy, and I said, Hattie McDaniel's Oscar needs to be replaced. And they eventually wrote him back, and they said, "We don't do that," and sent him some Hattie postage stamps. And so they just sent him some stamps and like, "We don't do that, but here's some stamps." And he told me the story. And that was happening a lot. A lot of people were like, "This Oscar must be replaced. It's been, a long time." But then I send that letter to the PR person. We go fast forward a few years, and I get a call within 10 minutes because I think they were worried. Okay, who is this Kevin Goff, and what is he about? What is he going to do? And I wasn't going to do anything because my whole thing was I would have never protested anything. I would have carried on with the work, knowing that the work would have created a situation for them to replace it. And that happened. So I was glad that it happened. And we could look at it as another situation. Well, this was after Hattie, she had already passed. But I'm glad it happened. She deserved the award. So here we are.
Well, we are excited that you're doing this work. You're continuing to work. And the entire time we've been talking, and yes, I believe this piece was commissioned by Tallgrass Film Festival for the Hattie McDaniel celebration that they did, the proclamation. I think it was in 2020. Can you read that date?
October, this one.
Yes.
Do hereby proclaim October 10th, 2004?
2004, yes.
That sounds about right.
I just feel like with our title, Reflections of Hattie McDaniel, she's been looking over us and a part of the spirit here in this room. I don't know how you feel about it, but just having her behind us this entire time has just been very comforting. I feel like she's nodding and appreciating you being here and being not only a direct descendant, but taking the care and being so respectful of making sure that her legacy continues on. And we just so appreciate
and
that.
And thank you. And it takes a whole lot of people to make things like this happen. And to if we hadn't connected, there were other things I was doing, but that was like a major thing when you reached out, and we started communicating. And then the Tallgrass thing happened later, and I've traveled, my wife and I, to different places and had presentations and did some things with the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, as well as the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, the Motion Picture and Television Fund. So there are a lot of institutions that have come around. I mean, Hattie when she passed away, she was at the Motion Picture Country Hospital, which is now the Motion Picture and Television Fund. She was the first black resident. So she has all these firsts. Some of them are like the kind of first you want to have, and some of them are the kind that you're kind of like, well, that's not how I want to be first. But she was always at the forefront of a lot of things, and it just wasn't her. You have to give credit to a lot of people that were around during her time that were instrumental as well.
Well, before we take a couple of questions from the audience, do want to give you all a chance to ask a question to Kevin if you have one. What is the significance of today?
Well, this is her birthplace. I'm here for the first time, my wife and I. So that's, that when we got off the plane Monday at like 10:30 p.m., I kind of felt something. Yeah, there was a feeling, it was like, there was awareness, yes, this is where her journey started. And that was important to be here because that's how we ended up in Colorado, because that was part of her journey. It was kind of like that film that's out with, about Gordon Parks, I Need Paris. And we have the great gentleman over here who's related to Gordon Parks. And so I was tracing or trying to follow some of the places where she had a significant part of her life, and Colorado was one of them. Of course, I'm from Los Angeles, so I had a chance to see a lot of things there, and it was natural to come here. I had to be here at some point. So, yeah, it's an important piece.
But you mentioned earlier, I think, the date.
Today's date.
Yes.
Yeah, today is the 72nd anniversary of Hattie's passing. She died on October 26, 1952 of breast cancer. And so I don't know if all this was arranged with that in mind, but yeah, this is the anniversary of her passing.
Well, things work out the way they're supposed to work out.
Right.
They really do. I believe that. Is there any questions in the audience that anyone would like to ask? Okay, we don't have a mic out there, so can you kind of like be a little loud, and if we need to repeat it, we will. Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for being here, you and your wife. Two questions. The first one is, you mentioned a book that you're going to come out with. Will there be a book signing, or will you disseminate that information to us at some point through somebody so we can know where that is?
No, I'm coming right here when the book is done, and there will be a book signing. It's through Barnes and Noble Press, and it's on pre-sale now. And the title is Hattie McDaniel: A Reflective Life, and I'm in the editing part of it, but I'm going to take a little more time right up into the end of the year because I want to include a section on Wichita and my experience here for this entire week that I'm here. So it's going to make its way into the book. So I have enough time to get that in there.
That's wonderful.
And you had a second question.
Thank you. The second question is, can you tell us a little bit about Hattie's post-Oscar life, if you know of her specific feelings about it, because it wasn't like she had this grand, oh, I want an Oscar, like, and it set them forth into this excellent,
Right.
big career.
Right. It's a great question. If you search for interviews from the actors from Gone with the Wind, you'll find Clark Gable doing interviews, and Olivia de Havilland and Vivian Lee, but you won't find any of Hattie or any of the black cast. None of those same outlets cared to interview him. I was contacted by Madame Tussauds Wax Museum because they said, hey, we want to do a wax figure of Hattie. Can you send us her dimensions and everything? And so I reached out to the Academy and different organizations on, like, how they save dresses and drawings and things and artifacts from these different actors. They didn't save the stuff for Hattie. There was nothing. So eventually, the whole thing with the Wax Museum, they said they can't do it because they wanted precise measurements. I mean, I knew how tall she was and her weight pretty closely, but I didn't have specific dimensions that would have been in the paperwork with those film studios. But they didn't keep that. So those are the kind of things that it's another example of what value or do you place on people or not. And obviously there wasn't the same value being placed on someone like Hattie McDaniel's life with all she did, and all she did not just for the industry but for her country, for her fellow performers, for her friends, for people she didn't know. So it's a double-edged sword.
And then there was a question in the back.
Do you know how many films? I have two questions.
Okay.
How many films that Hattie did in Hollywood?
You know, on IMDb, he said, do I know how many films Hattie did in Hollywood, right? And on IMDb, she has around 85 or so credits, maybe 90 credits, but a lot of stuff that she did was uncredited. And that happened with white performers too, but it happened a lot with black performers and Native American, Hispanic, and so on. But they say she probably did 300 films or projects. And collectively, Hattie, her brother Sam, and sister Etta collectively probably did 1,000 projects. So that's another branch for me to go down, or rabbit hole or something, to find out and document that and find out what those credits.
And also, Oscar Micheaux, if I pronounced that correctly. Do you know if she did any films with him?
Yeah.
Few avenues that black actors can go.
Right, yeah, Oscar Micheaux and Hattie.
Well, you know, Oscar Micheaux is buried here in Great Bend, Kansas.
I heard someone told me that, yeah,
and
I learned
we
that.
do have things in our file pertaining to Oscar Micheaux. And those who don't know who he was a black filmmaker, the earliest that we can attribute to, long before the ones that we know today. And he not only was a producer and a writer, and he promoted, he traveled across the United States every year with his films. And Wichita, and Kansas was one of his stops. He was all over. And there is a connection in Great Bend. He has descendants here in Wichita, and we're still trying to work through some of that story. But a lot of the problem is that it's not documented, or people, for whatever reasons, didn't share. And that's, again, part of the reason why, sharing your stories with your family is so important, especially in the black community. But so he has roots. And so that's a great question, because we have not seen anything in our works or in our history and research where there was an overlap or a connection or an intersection, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Right. And that might be another question as I go to some of the museum conferences and get with people who are doing this type of research to see if there is someone who might know that. But maybe that's something that in your travels.
I'm gonna look into that.
That would be phenomenal.
And I think Oscar Micheaux, if someone knows the answer, if I'm wrong, but I think he did about 40 films, and a lot of them were lost or destroyed, and the ones that are survived, they had to kind of go through a process to kind of reestablish some of it. And again, the infrastructure, and that's the difference. Even today in Hollywood, they have an infrastructure, but that infrastructure still does not include the black performer in the same way. They don't have the control, so it makes sense. Like someone like an Oscar Micheaux was like, well, I want to have my own infrastructure so I can decide, who's in the picture, what the story is, tell my story accurately, get it out there, and I don't want anybody changing the narrative on me. And Hollywood came out a few years ago to a movie called Abe Lincoln Vampire Slayer. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. So it goes to show you, you can take a realistic subject, a real person, and then you could throw fantasy in it. And then the next generation sees that and go, oh, okay, they don't know he was a president. They think he's a vampire slayer. And it gets all muddled as the generations go on. And that's how, you lose your culture, your community when that happens. So again, like you were saying, it's important to document stories. There are things I wish I had did with my father. We had many conversations. I didn't record those conversations. And I remember some of them, but I wish I had. My grandmother too. I mean, I said to my grandmother one time, I said, and she was born in 1912, my dad's mother, and I said, "Grandmother, I'm going to write a book on you." And she said, "Oh, really?" And she was 4'11", flaming red hair, bow-legged, Creole woman, and she would laugh like, "Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo. You're gonna write a book on me?" Hoo, 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 hoo. And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna write a book on you." And I said, this is how I'm gonna start it off. She said, "Okay, let's hear it." I said, "Alice Charlotte Clark was born in 1912, the same year the Titanic sunk." She said, "That's a horrible start to my book." She said, "I don't want," so I mean, I wish I recorded that conversation, but yeah, documenting is so important. There's the shoulda, woulda, coulda thing, and you can't get that back in that way. So I agree.
I wanted to just kind of circle back with Oscar Micheaux real quick. Oscar Micheaux, again, was in silent movies, and what was really important to know about him, we all heard of the movie Birth of a Nation and all of the context that went around that, Ku Klux Klan and different things. But Oscar Micheaux had a movie, Within Our Gates, that was the counter to Birth of a Nation, and it was very significant because it showed African American and Black perspective in a very positive light. So those are the things that we don't want to gloss over, and I do thank you for that question because it's very important that we know that whether it's in books or film or song or music or poetry or whatever we're doing as creatives, it's important to counter and tell those stories and messages and have our history documented in whatever format we can. And Oscar Micheaux, thinking back then that we're not going to have this narrative of Birth of a Nation define our African American existence because that's someone else's perspective of us and someone else's story, which we know was shown in the White House. So you can imagine how much relevance and power that movie had to a subculture that was basically destroying our nation. And here's this Oscar Micheaux saying, "I'm going to counter that with what I can do and take that across the United States." And so Within Our Gates is shown quite often on the Turner broadcast or the TBN.
TCM?
Yes, thank you. Usually 3 to 4 times a year. They'll show that, and it is black and white, and I'm sorry, yes, black and white and silent. But to watch these actors demonstrate and portray African Americans at that time in a different light is so powerful. So I hope each of you take time at some point to learn more about Oscar Micheaux and even another filmmaker, Gordon Parks. And again, we have a relative of Gordon Parks here in the audience with us. These gentlemen, these folks stepped out, and again, Hattie McDaniel, in a time and place to tell our stories and to represent us in spaces that were not very welcoming. They were not very supportive at times, but yet they persevered. And even today, we are still benefiting from those legacies. Part of our exhibition here, and I'm not want to get too far out of the space, but 2 of the photographs that we have with our current exhibition is with Gordon Parks, part of his early work that we are using to help start to tell stories and help people get into that mind space. So I saw a couple other hands. Let's try to take a couple more, and then we probably got to wrap up because I think we went way over our allotted time. Who's next? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mary, and thank you so much for being here and sharing these stories about Hattie.
Thank you.
I'm looking at her photo there, probably backstage at the Oscars, and she's got that bouquet of flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So beautiful. I wish the women in Hollywood would do that now, because it's just so beautiful. Anyway, I'm wondering, is there any writings from, did Hattie ever write things? Do you have a handwriting sample of hers? Were there anything like paycheck stubs or checkbook rosters or grades from school or that sort of thing? And also, gosh, I can't remember my other question, but please answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, for example, the Margaret Herrick Library, that's the Academy's library, a branch of the Academy. They have some artifacts of Hattie's. My father actually donated some stuff to them as well. But there's some stuff from her schoolwork, and you can see her penmanship. How you used to be in class and it'll have a word and then you write it in cursive, maybe it's printed here and you do the cursive. So you can see, her penmanship and things of that nature. In Colorado, I met a couple of gentlemen. Their grandmother was a childhood friend of Hattie. And they said they used to write each other. They were in elementary school together. And then when Hattie went to Hollywood, they kept in touch and they wrote each other. And that family, they're looking for the letters because and when I was over at their place, I saw an envelope from Hattie to her childhood friend, but the envelope was empty. Because I said, oh, envelopes, and I was going to see a letter of Hattie's, but the letter wasn't in there. But they said it's somewhere around there. And the guy was like, I'm a pack rat. I got to go through all this stuff, and I'm kind of filtering through it. It's going to go to storage. But he said, when I find those letters, I'm going to let you know. And he said it probably should be quite a few letters between those two. And that would be great to, see those.
That's treasure.
Yeah, treasure,
My other
indeed.
question was personal effects. Are there any personal effects of Hattie still in the family?
There's some, my dad had these 2 giant stacks of these giant radio records for Beulah. He gave donated one of the stacks to the Academy, and we have the other stack. And, there are, some photos and things like that. But it's not as much as it should have been. I wish there were home movies, and who knows, maybe, I wasn't around at that time when she passed and she left things in her will to like my father and her brother and people like that. So there's probably stuff somewhere in someone's house or floating out there that may surface. So I've been focusing on, finding those treasures when I can, but also creating the new treasures. And one is the book I'm working on, and then I want to do a podcast on the entire family and help to broaden out knowledge on all the children, the parents who are buried in Denver. My father's father, my grandfather, he was from Denver. He was in Denver when Etta had him. But now my father and grandfather are buried in the same cemetery as Hattie at Angeles Rosedale in Los Angeles. They're probably like 40 yards from each other. I'm not going to be buried there. I want to be shot into space. With the hopes that someone would find me, revive me, and I could do some other stuff. But she couldn't be at Hollywood Memorial. And then when some new owners took over in 1999, they renamed it Hollywood Forever. And they wanted to move Hattie to where she wanted to be, but it had been almost 50 years since she had passed. So, my father was like, no, let's just let her stay where she is. So they did put up a monument. They said, let's do the next best thing. So my father and those owners talked, and they put up a marble monument overlooking the lake with an inscription on it. It's really beautiful, and it's one of the most visited things there at that cemetery. Rudolph Valentino is there. It's like a lot of her acting peers are at that cemetery, and that's where she wanted to be. And that's another example of denying someone something. I mean, just a basic thing to where you want to be buried, and it didn't happen because of melanin.
So I think we have one more question. If we take one more, we probably need to finish up. And I see 2 hands, so.
We have examples of her penmanship right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's her signature, yeah.
So it's really beautiful. We thought, oh wow, that was really cool until we thought this was her actual signature, and it's very flowy and beautiful. So this is an example of her penmanship right here.
Thank you. And go ahead. We wanted to get the one back here.
I know Carla. Good afternoon, again.
Hey, hi.
Carla Eccles had said something about her starting a church. Do you know what church in Wichita they went to? And also, have you seen Roxy's clips of our own Carla Burns hi-hat?
I haven't seen that, and I'm still learning about. I mean, this is my first time here. I'm still learning, so I'm not sure about the details of the church she went to. I know she was faith-based, and some of her quotes mentioned that. So,
Was she AME, I believe?
yeah.
So-
There was one down the street from her house that I think she had an association with in Los Angeles.
There were several, but I know St. Paul AME was just right next door, and again, that might have been the church that she attended. Actually, this street here that we call Water initially was called Church Street, And so it could have been that she might have been part of AME here church right next door, or it could have been one down the street. And we're still trying to gather up a lot of those little details as we continue on. Well, I want to go ahead and thank you for making your journey to Wichita,
Thank you.
Kansas, and celebrating
you.
your great aunt. You know, she's your great aunt, but we call her the First Lady of Performing Arts right here at Miss Hattie McDaniel.
Yes.
Is what we call her. So we would like to thank the Tallgrass Film Association and Tallgrass Film Festival for inviting the Kansas African American Museum to be a part of the Hattie McDaniel Day. We appreciate the sponsors, staff of Tallgrass, TCAM, volunteers, and our guests, that is you, for making this program a reality by celebrating Miss Hattie McDaniel. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Jillian.
Hello. Happy Hattie McDaniel Day at Tallgrass's 22nd Annual Film Festival here in Wichita. I am Melanie Addington. I'm the Executive Director of Tallgrass Film Association. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. We are proud to be bringing you the best new independent film from around the world. We're glad to have you here. We want to extend a special thank you for attending, buying passes, bringing friends to the festival, because none of this would be possible without you. If you enjoy your experience, please use our hashtag Tallgrass22nd. We'd also like to thank our many sponsors. You can find a full list of sponsors in our online program at Tallgrass Film. We're halfway through, guys. We're halfway through. At tallgrassfilm.org. We especially would like to thank our presenting sponsor, Archer Hotel, and the Orpheum Theater for hosting us. What a beautiful theater we have here. Specific to Hattie McDaniel Day, we have sponsors City of Wichita, Kansas Humanities, and Visit Wichita, so please thank them. Next, I would like to invite, yes, please give them a round of applause. Next, I would like to invite Stacy Olden, the Executive Director of the Orpheum Performing Arts Center, to the stage.
Welcome everyone. As Melanie said, I'm Stacy Olden. I'm Executive Director here at the Orpheum Theater. We are a proud host venue and sponsor of the Tallgrass Film Festival. It is definitely one of our favorite local events of the year. So a big thank you to them for allowing us to be a part of it. So welcome to this historic theater. It was built in 1922, so 102 years ago. And right here on this very stage, we had some incredible legends. We had Louis Armstrong, we had Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie, and Ray Charles was our, in 2004, I believe. So this theater holds some incredible special memories, and one that we are very proud of also involves film, because film is a big part of our operations and entertainment that the community comes in for. But in February of 1940, we were the Kansas premiere of Gone with the Wind for Hattie McDaniel. So we are so proud that we were able to premiere that here for the state of Kansas. It was a 3-day event, and from what we understand, all of those shows sold out from what I can see from history, historical documents. So again, this is a really special day for us because we find such value in our history, and especially in the people that were a part of it. This theater will be undergoing a restoration starting next year. We're in the middle of a capital campaign. We'll be dark for a year, so unfortunately we won't be able to be a part of the Tallgrass Film Festival for 2025, but we look forward to having you all join us again in 2026. So again, thank you for letting us be a part of this, and thank you for being here today for Hattie McDaniel Day.
Good evening. I'm Andre Seward, Programming Director for Tallgrass Film Festival. Today, we have been celebrating Academy Award winner and Wichita native Hattie McDaniel at the Kansas African American Museum. Hattie McDaniel was an American actress, singer, songwriter, and comedian. For her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind, she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, becoming the first African American to win an Oscar. She also had an extensive acting career, both credited and uncredited. We're going to look at a short clip of some of her work and some commentary about her life.
Good evening. My name is Sierra Franklin Morton, and I am the Assistant Director of Tallgrass Film Association. I'm going to veer off my script for just a little bit, but I myself am a Wichita native, born and raised, and one of my favorite memories growing up and doing theater as a child is having people tell me, like, you should look into Hattie McDaniel, because she was just like you. She was from Wichita, and I think you could do what she did. And I think about that all the time, and it really hit me this morning that I am very honored to be able to be a part of this presentation to this wonderful family. And today, all of us here at the Tallgrass Film Association are very honored to host Hattie's great-grandnephew, Kevin John Goff, and his wife Jillian to Wichita for the very first time. Please give them a round of applause as they make it to the stage. And we would also like to invite Wichita District 1 City Councilman Brandon Johnson and Wichita Mayor Lily Wu, who will be presenting the Goffs with the present from the City of Wichita.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, good evening, everyone. It's Hattie McDaniel Day. Good evening, everyone. There we go. There we go. I'm Brandon Johnson. I represent District 1 on the Wichita City Council. I usually refer to that as all the cool stuff in the community and the best district. Tell the mayor to cover her ears on that one. It's a true honor to join you all. I did want to also recognize that our mayor, Lily Wu, is here tonight as well. I don't see any other council members, but again, it's an honor to join you all. We're here for a very special reason this evening, to honor and celebrate a very special person, Wichita's very own Hattie McDaniel. Many of you may know that in 1940, McDaniel became the first black performer to win an Academy Award for her role as Mammy in the timeless film Gone with the Wind. But prior to that, though, in 1914, McDaniel and her sister developed their own all-female show, the McDaniel Sisters Company, which made them the first recorded black female producers at the turn of the 20th century. McDaniel was credited with being the first black woman to sing on radio and possibly the first black artist in general to sing across those airwaves. And after becoming an Academy Award winner in 1947, she took over the Beulah Show and doubled the ratings of the original series, which was another first, a black woman as the star of a network program. Her success at the time, though, was not without its struggles. As you know, being a trailblazer, there's always some pushback. There were some Caucasian audiences that didn't always appreciate her sassy and opinionated attitude, but they had to get over it. Some sought to restrict her boldness. They had to get over that too. Some in the black community adored her. Many in the black community adored her, but some audiences criticized her for accepting Hollywood's stereotypical roles and refused to support her career success. That happens too often, but they had to get over it too. And on a subject near and dear to my heart, and I just learned this recently, McDaniel also played a pivotal role in fighting segregated housing in LA and won a landmark decision in Superior Court. She used to organize workshops on Saturdays to strategize against a lawsuit denying her and other people of color the right to buy property in an affluent Sugar Hill neighborhood. She gathered 250 sympathizers who accompanied her to court, and her case set a precedent that would later help the U.S. Supreme Court rule race-based restrictive house covenants were unconstitutional. That's powerful. I love that about her. Hattie starred in over 300 films, but was only accredited for 83, and she has not one but 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And now, to add to her well-deserved recognition and celebration, on behalf of the Wichita City Council, Mayor Wu and I want to present her family the key to the city of Wichita. we'll read this forward. It says, Key to the City of Wichita, presented in honor of Hattie McDaniel. The City of Wichita posthumously presents Hattie McDaniel, actress, singer, songwriter, and comedian, with the key to the city in recognition of her legacy as an immensely talented entertainer and her groundbreaking achievements as the first African American to win an Academy Award. The city is honored to celebrate her early roots in Wichita, Kansas, her contributions to the entertainment industry, and her dedication to community service. Ms. McDaniel's incredible career and commitment to excellence has inspired countless individuals and will continue to do so for generations to come.
This one's crushing the blanks more than the actual.
Thank you, everyone. My dad, this was his journey originally to broaden Hattie and the family's accomplishments, pitfalls, victories, defeats. And before he passed away, I picked up that baton and said I wanted to take it to, whatever that next journey and, that path is. And of course, it started out in Los Angeles because, a lot of people know about her career in Hollywood. And then my wife and I ended up in Colorado because she had a history there. That was kind of like where her professional career started. And she started sharpening her skills, doing vaudeville and radio and tent shows, and she was writing songs, playing the drums, sitting in with Jelly Roll Morton. She was doing all these things, and I still, to this day, I keep finding these things and finding out about, all the things she was involved with. Charities, mentoring, entertaining the troops during World War II, and like Mr. Johnson mentioned, fighting for fair housing. But in the back of all that, there was Wichita, and this moment had to happen for us to be here, my wife Jillian and I, and it was the beginning. It was the foundation of who she was. And when I wrote the poem Black Not Accepted, at the end of that poem it says, Wichita accepts her. You realize you love her, you accept her, and now it felt like Black accepted. So here we are today in this great honor from the city of Wichita, and like Hattie, when she gave the Oscar speech, words it's hard to find words. But trust me, Hattie McDaniel thanks all of you. And if she was here, she'd be hugging everybody in this building. She'd get around to everybody. So thank you for this moment, for Tallgrass, for the Kansas African American Museum and everybody associated with this moment and our trip here, our first trip to Wichita. Thank you very much.
I'd like to once again thank the city for presenting the key. I would also like to recognize a couple of special guests in the audience. Gordon Park's son, David, I believe is here. He'll wave your hand. He'll be joining Kevin after the film for a panel discussion. So please do stick around with a few more announcements. But also, Tallgrass has been part of the fight for a long time in celebrating Hattie McDaniel. So I'd like to honor Emily Bonavia. If Annie, you can sort of point at her. She's been on the board since day one, and she helped in this remember. So thank you.